Hey everybody, this is Lisa Harper, and you're listening to the Not Ready Yet Curating Conversations for the Aging Journey podcast. This is the show that changes the conversations we have with our loved ones about aging and life decisions. Let's have more honest conversations where we speak the quiet parts out loud. Today I'm joined by Allyson Schrier, someone who understands dementia not only as an educator and innovator, but also as a wife and caregiver. After caring for her husband through his dementia journey, Allyson dedicated her career to helping families navigate the realities of dementia with greater confidence, compassion, and support. Her background spans technology, healthcare education, and dementia innovation. She is the founder of Zinnia TV, a streaming service created specifically for people living with dementia, and has spent years educating both family and professional caregivers on best practices for care and engagement. Allyson has worked with the University of Washington Memory and Brain Wellness Center, facilitates caregiver support groups, and has been recognized nationally for her contributions to Alzheimer's and dementia care. Thank you so much, Allyson, for joining me today. I'm so excited to have this conversation. This is so valuable to everyone listening. I think we're all being touched by dementia, so thank you so much for being here.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And so I always start with everybody's why, and we touched upon it in the intro, but in your words, like, how did you get here to this point today with Zinnia TV?
Well, like so many people who operate in the dementia sphere, the most compelling reason why I'm here is because of my personal experience as a caregiver for my husband who was living with dementia. So Evan was diagnosed at the age of 47 when our kids were just 12 and 15. So I was like right in the thick of being a parent to people who were becoming teenagers. Shortly after Evan was diagnosed, my stepfather was diagnosed with vascular dementia. And around the same time, my stepmom started behaving in a way that was never diagnosed, but it, from my perspective, was most likely Alzheimer's disease. And so for myself, as well as myself as a daughter supporting her parents who were trying to support their spouses, I suddenly was thrust into the position of needing to learn a lot, needing to learn it quickly, and needing to learn how to convey these ideas and skills to other people, my parents.
Yeah, I mean, wow, that is a lot that happened in a span of time there with you. So for those listening, what is Zinnia TV? What could you share with our listeners on what they would see or sound, or walk us through what an experience would look like?
You bet. So Zinnia is a streaming service. So think Netflix or Hulu, but all of the content has been specifically built to be digestible by and engaging for people who are living with dementia. So let me just take that a little bit further. What does it mean to be digestible by and engaging for people who are living with dementia? Last spring, I attended a conference of the Michigan Assisted Living Association where I facilitated a panel that was titled Low Tech and No Tech Solutions for People Who Are Living with Dementia. The audience was people like me. They were family caregivers. There were professional caregivers as well as unpaid family caregivers, people who work in long-term care, as well as those supporting loved ones at home. The panelists were all people who had a dementia diagnosis. And so one of the questions that I asked out of the gate was, so tell me what you, panelists, enjoy watching on TV these days. And all but one of them had the same response, which was, I don't watch TV anymore because, oh my gosh, I can't keep track. It's like the audio is coming in and the visuals are competing with it, and it's too fast. I can't follow it. I can't track the plot. I can't keep track of which character is doing what. So I feel all of these like sort of chaos inside of me because I am not able to keep up with any of it. And what makes it worse is that I know I should be. I know that once I was. And so it makes me feel diminished. It's something I used to love doing in the evening with my husband after dinner. We'd watch a show, and we just can't because I drive him crazy with all of the questions I keep asking him. So if I walk into a room and the TV is turned on, I either leave the room or I turn it off. So figure these are people who are not terribly advanced in their diagnosis, right? These are people who were able to get to Michigan, right? And
Right.
they're able to sit on a panel and they're able to have fluid conversation. And yet already they're finding that television is something that is really quite problematic. So going back to what brought me here and to what is Zinnia, I recognized really early on with my husband that television was not really working for him. And when he moved into long-term care, where they frequently put the television on and parked people in front of it literally because he was in a wheelchair, I would enter the space and find him sometimes pounding on his chest with his fists. I would find him sometimes just screaming out curse words. I would find him wide-eyed with his teeth gritted, looking around the room as if to say, like, get me out of here. But the problem is he was nonverbal, and he was in a wheelchair. So unlike those people in Michigan, he couldn't get up and turn the TV off. He couldn't ask people if they would mind turning it off for him. And so I think about the chaos that he was feeling inside of his body, the anxiety, the fear, and there was nothing that he could do about it. So coming back to what is Zinnia, Zinnia is not really just a replacement for television. The idea is not, hey, instead of putting somebody in front of Turner Classics for 2 hours, put them in front of Zinnia for 2 hours. So while the videos are entertaining because they are slow paced, there's generally not audio except for there's not dialogue, I should say. So the videos are set to peaceful music. And they are a host of different topics. So there are baking, fly fishing, basketball, auto mechanics, right? But there's also nature, and there are all kinds of animal videos, and there are travel videos, there are faith videos. So all these different categories. And the idea is that we want something that the person living with dementia is able to connect with. They're able to connect with it physically, physiologically, because the images are slow paced enough and the audio is not competing with it, so they can actually pay attention to what's going on. And maybe it's engaging enough because they were crazy about sewing when they were a healthy person. Maybe they really like watching the sewing video enough that the caregiver can actually step away and get some respite. But if we look at the research, and we've done a lot, we can get back to that, but if we look at the research behind what are the benefits of watching these Zinnia videos, the main benefits are that watched together, they help promote connection and conversation. So let me just go a little deeper on that, and then I'm going to come back to it. When visiting my husband in long-term care, found that our conversations became increasingly transactional, meaning that I would just talk about the stuff of the day. I would show up, I would complain about the traffic on the way there. I might say something about how busy it was at the circle when I dropped the kids off for school today. I might talk about a TV show that I watched yesterday. I mean, it was just all stuff. It was nothing that really connected us. What I found is that if there was a visual that we were sharing, the conversations would go deeper. And so this is tied directly into one of the things that I learned when I was becoming a dementia educator. I studied under Teepa Snow, whom I adore, and one of the lessons was this concept of visual verbal touch. The idea being that if I'm about to brush your hair, for instance, and you're a person who's living with dementia, that I don't just dive in and brush your hair. Instead, I start with a visual. And the visual might be me brushing my own hair. The visual might be that we look at a picture of somebody brushing their hair. But the point is, because our visual capacity to take in information stays solid longer than some of our other sensory receptors, if I show somebody a visual of what we're about to do, it helps them to have an aha moment. So visual, I brush my hair. Verbal, I say, how about if we brush our hair? Or more simply, let's brush hair. And then touch, so it's visual, verbal, touch, is that I now, with your permission, brush your hair. So what I found with my husband is that if I brought in a visual, it gave us something to connect on. So maybe I would bring a magazine that had one of his hockey magazines that he got because he loved hockey. Maybe I could bring in a hockey glove from the garage or a puck. If I wanted to talk about something having to do with skiing, maybe I would bring in his ski coat. You get the idea that there's this thing that we're looking at together, and now we are able to go more deeply into the topic. So one of the research findings with Zinnia is that it is hugely helpful in fostering connection and conversation. Because if we are both watching a video about something that you loved, maybe it's playing the guitar, or maybe it is changing the oil in the car, right? Whatever it might be. If we watch that video together and it's slow paced enough that you can connect with it and there's not competitive dialogue, then I can start asking you questions. Like, what is he doing right there? Or I can share reminiscences if the person is nonverbal. I know that you are about the best hockey player I've ever watched. I've never seen anybody skate like you. So I can really tie my loved one's experiences into what we're watching. So that's the number one use case of Zinnia videos. The number two use case, and this is not necessarily in priority of efficacy, this is just, I'm just listing them. So number two is that people, caregivers, rely on Zinnia videos to help reduce and soothe agitation. So for instance, and what's a very interesting thing for me as a founder is that you create a product and you have this list of things that you intend the product to do, ways that you intend it to help. But once you put it out in the world and people are using it, you start to realize that they know more about your product than you do. They're using it in ways that you didn't expect. And so I was at a conference very early on. We didn't even have our app yet. Our videos just lived on a website, on a browser. And there was a woman who approached me who worked in long-term care. And she shared with me this story about a woman in her care who would, on a regular basis, start sundowning, which a lot of your listeners are probably familiar with.
Yep. And for those that aren't, could you give a brief what that is?
Sure. So sundowning is the idea that at some point in the day, fairly consistently, typically the afternoon, the person living with dementia starts to get highly agitated. And that agitation can play out in different ways. Maybe they become angry. Maybe they become withdrawn. Maybe they just are visibly agitated in their movements. They can't settle. They get upset easily. There are a lot of reasons why. Nobody knows for 100% sure why this happens. It could be that maybe around 4 o'clock when I start getting frustrated, it's because typically at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I would be doing something. Maybe I would be starting to make dinner. Maybe I would be picking up kids at school. Maybe I would be wrapping up my day at the office. And that is no longer a thing for me. And so I'm getting agitated because there's something that I should be doing, but I can't figure out what it is. It could be just that I'm exhausted, right? And we can talk more about that, the exhaustion
Yeah.
that comes with dementia. But anyways, so what this woman said is that there was a woman in her care who typically towards the end of the afternoon would start getting really agitated, to a point where she would get angry, she would start yelling, she became really unmanageable. Per her doctor's orders, they would at that point every day give her a dose of an antipsychotic medication to calm her down. So the woman who approached me said, and Allyson, I don't like giving her an antipsychotic, which makes sense. Antipsychotics are really not recommended for people with dementia. They are way overprescribed. She said, but we have to because it's the only thing that we have. And sure enough, it brings her down, but I'm watching her decline more quickly as a result of these medications, which is a fact. And I'm watching her become a fall risk because now she's all wobbly. And she said, so knowing that she had been a pediatric nurse all her life, I said to the staff, look, let's try this. When she starts getting agitated, what would happen if we show her one of the Zinnia baby videos? Like, would that soothe her? And she said, Allyson, it's been a game changer. And she said, in fact, it's worked so well that we now have worked with her doctor and changed her care plan so that the first order of business when she starts to become agitated is that we show her this video that soothes her. And so some families
Wow.
will, knowing that dad typically gets upset in the afternoons, and knowing that dad was a big hiker, will sit down with him 10 minutes before he typically gets upset and say, hey, let's watch this great video about hiking in the Pacific Northwest, for instance. And so they sort of they jump through the time that he would typically get upset. And we've just had wonderful stories, both from family caregivers and long-term caregivers, and in a research setting, demonstrating how when somebody is in the thick of anxiety, that we are able to soothe them with a visual that pulls them out of that state that they're in.
Zinnia TV, you can make a playlist. Is that correct?
Wow, I'm glad that you asked that question. Right now with Zinnia, you can identify the videos that you like the best, but you have to select them one after the other, which I can't stand. So we are actually right now working with NIH funding to do a research project with Duke University where we are testing a playlist builder. It's a feature we would really like to add.
Yeah, and when you're talking about putting something on that was part of them, it's like you're putting in front of them who they are and who they were, being able to reach somebody in those moments, any kind of interest that somebody had. And then there's also videos on activities of daily living, ADLs. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And that's another one of the things that we have tested extensively in long-term care settings through an academic partner. So as I mentioned, the visual verbal touch, right? If I'm about to brush your hair, let's brush our own hair, or let's watch a video of somebody brushing hair, because it sets the tone. It lets you know what's coming. So we have videos for drinking water, for using the toilet, for showering, for getting dressed. And so a lot of caregivers rely on these before they start the thing. They say, hey, let's watch a video together. They put a cup of tea out, maybe a glass of water. They sit down together to watch a video, and maybe the video is about getting dressed. And then afterwards, then the suggestion that, hey, let's go do that, becomes something that is more agreeable, because the person with dementia has just watched a video where everybody's getting dressed and they're okay with it. Right? They don't have any problem with it. So
it just brings back the cue into a space where the cue is lost. The cue is, there's no longer the triggers that we normally have. So it fills in that space of, hey, let's go do this. And also just even keeping your clock, I wake up in the morning, it's morning. And now, okay, these are things we're going to do to get ready for bed, just to help keep that our natural clock. Because I mean, the worst thing for a caregiver is someone that's, they're sleeping in the day, it's all over the place, they're up at night. I mean, that is just exhaustion for everyone. I think that that's important too. So it's like, it's not only, it's visual cues on something that speaks to their heart and who they have been and who you know them as. And then it's also the ADLs, which I think the audience is starting to hear that acronym. I heard somebody explain it the best that I thought. They said it's everything. If you think of everything you do from the moment you wake up to kind of the moment you get in your car to go to work, like anything you do in that space is considered an ADL. And I thought, wow, bathing, grooming, dressing, like it really kind of does. So I thought that was a smart way to say it. So I think for people to understand how this is so intentionally done.
Yeah, and I want to go back to that idea of playlists for a second. So each of our channels is effectively a playlist. So a lot of people will, for instance, put the nature channel on, say, or the travel channel, because when the gardening video ends in the nature channel, another video is going to kick in. So within the channels, they do play one video after the other. And we have a channel which is called the all day channel. And that is just a selection of videos from all of our channels. And in long-term care settings, they will sometimes have that running in a common space. So not intended for people to come pull up a chair and sit down and watch it all day. But the idea is that as people are passing through, they stop and watch for a few minutes. And it creates a really wonderful opportunity for visiting family or for staff to pause and watch with them and have a conversation about what they're looking at. We also do have playlists that we have constructed that are around topics that we know are of high value. So for instance, there is a babies playlist, which is just like 7 videos babies, toddlers playing, babies walking, babies eating. I mean, it's just one after the other. And we have another playlist, for instance, that's just family pets. So, or just morning, things that happen in the morning. So we are using that as kind of a stopgap until we have the ability to allow people to create their own playlists.
Okay, but like you say, each channel is kind of composed as a playlist and will continue. You had mentioned increased fall risk before, and people sometimes think of that, of course, with like leg strength, but with the fall risk, with how the brain is processing things, it was very fascinating to me about understanding what's happening and changing in the brain. If you could elaborate on that.
Yeah, sure. So specifically talking about that fall risk piece. So there is a visual piece. So people's depth perception changes, which, as you can imagine, would automatically increase the likelihood of me falling because I don't see things as well. People also, staying with that visual piece for a moment, can lose track of things that are the same shade or color. They don't see them as well. So, for instance, if I were asking, if I wanted to help you get dressed, and my grand idea was that I was going to place your clothing on the bed for you so that you could easily pick those clothes up and put them on. If I put your blue pants and your blue sweater and your blue socks on a blue bedspread, there's a good chance that you'd come out of the room and say the clothes aren't there because you don't see them.
Gotcha.
So if I'm walking in a hardwood floor and there's a beige rug on it, there's a good chance I won't even see that rug because of changes that are happening visually. So that's one piece. The other piece is think about what's happening in the brain, where in a brain that is losing tissue, which is what happens with dementia. So neurons die, the tissue associated with those dies. And so the brain becomes more porous. People describe it as sort of a Swiss cheesy kind of thing, as a Swiss cheesy sort of result because of all of the loss of tissue. So when I take in information, if the information is just something like, what would you like for lunch? I can immediately respond to you and say, kind of thinking maybe a tuna sandwich today. Or even if you said to me, would you like a ham sandwich or a bologna sandwich? Because you're trying to make things easier for me as a person with dementia. As a healthy person, I would just say ham. I don't really like bologna. But for a person who's living with dementia, the way that they're taking in that question, would you like a ham or a bologna sandwich for lunch today? The information is trying to travel through their brain to get to a point where they can come up with a response. But as the information is traveling through their brain, it's hitting road closures. So information, neuron A is trying to get to neuron B, but neuron B doesn't exist anymore. So neuron A needs to find another path. All of that rerouting takes time. And so this is why for a person who's living with dementia, even early stage dementia, it can take them up to 20 seconds to answer a very simple question. Because not only is there all of that, all those road closures as the information is traveling into their brain, right? But there's also all of those road closures as they're trying to then come out with a response. So this translates into physical activity as well. So as I'm walking along and I start to trip, my big fat healthy brain is going to say right foot forward fast, and I'm able to stop myself from falling. But if that information is still muddling around in my brain, I'm going to hit the ground before I've ever been able to respond.
Yeah. And the way you say that and the roadblock, it is. I mean, that's the information's traveling and it cannot travel anymore and it has to turn around and find another way, another route. I think you've referred to it, the gaps previous times as like there's bridges. Like the bridges, they're not there anymore. Right. You know, like we can't get across that. Right. And so I think that's really important for people to understand because, you know, as adult kids start seeing this and you've asked somebody something a few times or, you know, you're at a restaurant and you're like, just decide, like, what are we doing? And it's like, we need to understand what's going on in the brain so that arms us with the patience to understand why things are the way they are, because us getting impatient is just adding to the agitation. I'm trying to facilitate relationships and keep them going and conversations going.
Right.
Not put, to your point, roadblocks in conversations even, or opportunities to connect. I'm just going to talk to them like they're a child. No, it's not that they don't know how, it's that they're losing the ability to. Totally different. Totally different.
Right.
So, and that makes me think of something else I've heard you say about some people will say, well, why not just put on Sesame Street or something like that? Do you want to talk to that since we kind of crossed over there?
I do. I'm going to make a little note to that and I'm going to come back to that because I
Okay.
first
Yeah.
want to talk about something that I think everybody needs to understand about folks who are living with dementia. Our greatest teachers about how to support people living with dementia are people who are living with dementia. And we have to understand that if they are responding badly to something that we have said or done, chances are that we are the problem, not them. And it's because we're not really understanding where they're coming from. So I'm just going to give you two examples of what I learned not too long ago from people who are living with dementia. One was a woman who talked about what it is like for her to start her day. And she said, I remember what it was like when I didn't have dementia. Like I get that that you get up, you throw your legs over the side of the bed and you just sort of automatically, the next thing you know, you're brushing your teeth and then you're downstairs and you're putting on the coffee and everything is just sort of automatic. You've done it a million times before. You don't really need to think about what comes next because it sort of presents itself in your brain. She said, for me at this point, I have to think about every single thing I do. And she said, so when I wake up in the morning, the first thing that I do is I orient myself like, okay, wait, I'm in my bedroom, I'm in my bed, I'm awake, I need to sit up. So I sit up and then I put my feet on the floor and then I think about, okay, what do I need to do first? What do I need to do first? Okay, wait, my feet are cold. I need to put something on my feet to keep my feet warm. I need to find my slippers. Where are my slippers? And she said, this goes on throughout the entire day. And she said, so you can imagine that by the time lunchtime rolls around, I am exhausted. And so I need to stop. I need to not be pushed. I need to be given time to accomplish the things that I need to accomplish because they take me so much longer than they take you. That
And
was
so much
one thing.
effort and energy.
So
Yeah.
much effort and energy. And it's not that I'm stupid, right? And it's not that I'm willful. And it's not that I can't do the thing, but I need the time to do the thing. And when you're then pushing me and being like, come on, we're supposed to have been out the door 10 minutes ago. Right? That's not going to get you anywhere. Another thing that I heard somebody talk about that really made an impact on me was a woman talking about her experience when eating. And she said, and by the way, I mean, again, these are people who are very clear. They're very capable of describing what their experience is like. And they're people with whom you might be having a conversation for 10 minutes before you realize they have dementia. So she said, when I eat a meal these days, I put a placemat on the table. And I put on that placemat my plate, my fork and knife, a salt and pepper shaker, my drink of water, and my napkin, because now I know that the area that I need to focus on is just that little tiny area. Because having a whole big table in front of me, especially if there's food all over it, maybe today's mail is sitting on the table, maybe there's a vase of flowers. She said it's just way, way, way too distracting. That the thing that she always needs to do is simplify, simplify, simplify. And she said that recently she had her dad over for lunch. She had her little placemat with her stuff and she's very focused. She's ready to eat her meal. And she said, so I put my fork into my food. I pick it up. I'm about to put it in my mouth. And my dad says, so how are you doing? And she said, I had to put down my fork because I cannot put the food in my mouth and start chewing and respond to him. So I put my fork down and first of all, that's a hard question. How are you doing is big. We can try
Yeah.
to simplify the questions that we ask. We can try to be more targeted. How are the kids doing in school or whatever, something that is smaller. And she said, so she answered the question and he took a bite of his food. And so she took a bite of her food and she said, I'm about to put it in my mouth. And he asks me another question. So what do you think we're going to do this afternoon? And she puts her fork down. And she said that he was completely unaware because she had not yet educated him about the fact that, like, I cannot do two things at a time. The only way that I can eat a meal in comfort is if we stop talking and we let me just eat the meal. So I think it's really important for people to recognize that distractions are a thing And sometimes we are the distraction. Turn off the radio, turn off the TV, clear off the table, clean things out of the bedroom, simplify, simplify. Now, about the Sesame Street piece, would you want to watch Sesame Street? I wouldn't. The
No.
answer is not that we put on Sesame Street, it's not that we put on cartoons. So I have had people ask me, well, what about Leave It to Beaver? My mom really loves watching old reruns of Leave It to Beaver, so should I be giving that up and watching Zinnia TV instead? No. If she enjoys Leave It to Beaver and it doesn't leave her frustrated and she laughs and she gets it and she's enjoying herself, then watch Leave It to Beaver. There was a care community that I went to and where every single morning all of the memory care folks would gather around a TV and they would watch the same episode of The Price is Right. The same episode every day. And they laughed and they joked with each other about it. They loved it. Should they not do that? It sounds like it's working. So I think that
Right.
we just need to be really clear about what is and isn't working. And I might have
Yeah.
shared with you before about a woman who asked me at an event that I did recently about her mom watching Gunsmoke. She said, my mom just loves Gunsmoke. So every day we put on Gunsmoke. And she said, but I've started noticing that she gets very upset every time a gun is fired. I'm like, well, it's Gunsmoke. That
Yeah.
may no longer be the show that you can watch with your mom. We certainly
Yeah.
don't want to put on anything that is super triggering. And I know that a lot of people say, yeah, but all he wants to watch is the news. Well, there's going to be a price to pay if you're going to let him watch the news.
Yeah, and to watch that irritability and the confusion because, the processing of maybe showing something from the past that's not actually happening right now, they may believe this is happening right now. And it almost
Right.
becomes like an imminent threat. And it's like, whoa, no, they're recapping something. So, and I think that's where the normal TV and things like that, when they're just plugging in commercials and they're just doing whatever, they are also ingesting and digesting everything else that surrounds the show.
Oh my gosh, I know even for myself, we're rewatching Mad Men. Great show. Love it. And it's on AMC. All I want to do is watch Mad Men. However, AMC pops up scenes from another show that is this disgusting, like devil killing people show, and I hate that the price that I need to pay to watch the thing I want to watch is to watch previews of something that I would never in a million years watch. And I didn't see it coming. It just popped up because that's what they
Yeah.
want me to watch next.
Yeah.
So I think that watching
Yeah.
any kind of feed that's coming in that is not monitored can be problematic.
Yeah. And to just know that and be aware and see, because if things are triggering, if you leave the room and they were great and come back and they're not, what happened? What happened in that time? Was there I mean, I know we're on anniversaries this year of big events in the country, and, somebody may not be able to understand that they're recalling things. They are going back in time and replaying it. Not that it's not happening right now, but for somebody that doesn't have that distinguishing factor.
I can share
Okay.
anecdotally that when my mom was caring for my stepdad with vascular dementia, his one of his favorite pastimes is he would go hang out like he always did. He'd have the newspaper and be on his leather chair with his feet up on ottoman and the news playing in the background. And this one morning, he went running in and he shook her awake because it was an anniversary of 9/11. And he said, Kathleen, wake up. Terrible things are happening in New York. We need to get out of here. And
No. Yeah.
right, because of course he's going to think that it is, why would they have it on the news unless it's happening right now?
Oh
So,
gosh. So
yeah.
and that's the thing is like try to avoid those moments, right? And that's why educating people on what's going on in the brain and how do we reduce triggers and reduce agitation, and it's all a puzzle and trying to find the pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah.
So,
And it's a puzzle that's always changing,
yeah.
right? Because the way that a person is right now is not necessarily how they're going to be 6 months from now.
Yeah.
So, as caregivers, we are always looking for the next solution.
Yeah. No, and it's being creative and finding that.
Yeah.
So tell us about, how do subscriptions run? Because you've talked about in-home, like an individual that's a caregiver for someone living with dementia, and then we've talked about communities, long-term care, memory care communities that are also involved. So what's your subscription platform look like?
So our subscription platform for family caregivers is $69.99 a year, or people can buy a monthly subscription, which is $9.99 a month. So we have tried really hard. Like I just got my latest bill for my Netflix. I can't believe it went up again. But we have kept the same price for the entire time that we have been in business, and we
Wow.
want to keep doing that. For long-term care communities, there is sort of a formula that depends on how many people are being served by the subscription. And so some communities will pay $25 a month. We have communities that are paying $100 a month, but that's kind of the outside edge for a
Okay.
community.
So very affordable, and kudos to you to try to maintain that pricing for people.
You know what? I know what it's like to be a family caregiver, right? And it is expensive.
Yeah.
It's expensive, and oftentimes in my case, the breadwinner was the one who got dementia. So I had to be the breadwinner, and I couldn't command what he was commanding. I'd been out of the workforce for 15 years, so money is tight. So I really, really appreciate the fact that family caregivers are often people who are strapped, and we want to be able to support them.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing.
I mean, we've talked about Zinnia TV. We've talked about my story, I guess, as to how Zinnia TV came to be. I am still a dementia educator at heart, and so I can't help, even if the topic is something that has nothing to do with dementia. I still seem to somehow get education in there. I do want to let people know that we host a monthly free educational program. If you went to our website, which is zinniatv.com, there's a support option at the very bottom. Scroll, scroll, scroll. Support. If you go into support, you will be brought to a place where you can register for our free monthly education. And our programming is fantastic. So I worked, as we mentioned, at the University of Washington, the main Memory and Brain Wellness Center. And there I launched an education program, and then I managed it. And not by myself, I was working with amazing people. And the model was one that where everybody is a learner and everybody's an expert. And so we would have people our audience were doctors. So we'd have primary care providers, NPs, OTs, any kind of like allied folks who are supporting people with dementia who would be on the call. The first part of the call would be a didactic. Let's do a deep dive into some aspect of dementia detection, diagnosis, of support, and then it will be case presentations. And so that is the model that we use for our education programs, where the first part of it is that I or another expert comes in and talks about a topic that, frankly, I feel caregivers need to know about. Like our last one was all about anosognosia. How do you know whether the person is actually just in denial, or is that their brain is incapable of identifying this as dementia? Next month, we're having Natalie Edmonds, the dementia care blazer, who's one of my favorite educators, is going to come on and talk about like 7 things that every dementia caregiver needs to know. So
Okay.
anyway, those
Yeah.
are free.
And those
They're
are
an hour
free.
long, and we do this didactic, a deep learning, and then it's open to whatever questions you have about dementia specific to that topic, or just in general, like what's not really working for you right now. Go to zinniatv.com and then just scroll all the way down to that writing at the bottom that nobody ever looks at, but there's a support tag there. And if you click on support, you'll be brought to our educational series.
Okay, that's wonderful. Yes, for people to have free resources.
I will add, by the way, that we're always adding content, and the content that we've been adding most recently has really been in support of activities, promoting activities. And this is either in long-term care or for families. So I'll just really briefly tell you about the 3 topics. The first one is Today in History. So when I used to visit my husband in long-term care, inevitably one of the staff would stand up with their PDF, Today in 1892, and they would read from it. And I would watch the people living with dementia who were all like, not really paying attention because there's nothing visual. So we actually created a video series that is Today in History for people with dementia. It's on Zinnia, and there are 365 of them
Awesome.
organized by month. We also started creating these quizzes, and the quizzes, we try to figure out, how do you have something that's interactive without somebody pressing a button?
Mm.
because I could do like a multiple choice question on my phone thing, and it's like, bing, I just press the right answer, and now there I go. So the way that we've done it is that a quiz could be, for instance, about an example I like to use is American literature. Right? We don't go to Sesame Street type of topics. Stick with like people still have a lot of stuff going on. American literature.
Yeah.
So the question pops up and it has a picture of a boy standing there with a fishing pole, and it says, what book published in whenever it was, written by Mark Twain or whatever, featured a boy named Tom Sawyer? Now, there are three answers that are on the screen, and one of them might be The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, one might be Little Women, and one might be 1984, whatever. You would laugh out loud and say, it's The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. I mean, there he is. He's got his fishing pole, right? And it says, like, a boy named Tom Sawyer, right? It's The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. But we had funding to be able to test this in assisted living and memory care settings in Massachusetts. And what we found is what you would expect in assisted living. The assisted living folks were like, are you serious? Like, it's a dead giveaway. They hated it. But memory care, my gosh, it's been a big hit because the way we put those three questions, those three answers, and then slowly we take away the wrong answers so that all that's left is the correct answer. So everybody eventually gets it right.
Gotcha.
Which makes them feel really good. And I know we're probably running out of time, but an anecdote that goes along with this one is a woman who was doing volunteer work in a community. And there was a guy, John, who had been a writer for the LA Times. And nobody engaged with him because he was in a wheelchair, he was nonverbal. And so he was just sort of a piece of furniture. He didn't complain. People would just kind of wheel him around, park him in whatever was happening. And she was trying to find a way into John. Like, how do you connect with John? And so knowing that he had been a professional writer, she thought he probably knows a thing or two about American literature. So she put this quiz on, and John shouted out, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. And then he went on to shout out every single answer. And she said, so not only, Allyson, was it that we saw John take this like series of dopamine hits, right? He's just like, oh my God, I'm the guy. I'm the one here who is the expert. She said the big shift that was so amazing to watch was the care staff. She said they were dancing around. They were like, John's the man. Woo, John. And she said to see them see him was just amazing.
Wow.
As you can imagine, right? And so stories like that,
Wow.
about how people are using that content as an unlock. And I could go on and on and on with stories that people have sent us on email, or people who have seen me at events and told me their story about, like, we didn't know mom could talk anymore, or it's the first time I've heard my mother laugh in 3 years. And so that kind of stuff just fuels me. A third type of content that we've just started launching is lifelong learning. And these are documentaries. So I'd previously said that none of our content has dialogue. These do.
Okay.
And this is part of an effort to be able to connect with people at all stages, because there are people earlier on in their dementia for whom a slower experience is important, but they can still read words. They can't necessarily read a novel because they can't remember what happened the last sentence, right? But they can still read. And so we often have words that appear at the bottom of the screen, like closed caption. And with our lifelong learning, it is topics like the animals of Patagonia, or it might be something like the US Air Force, or the history of flight, the history of women's fashion, or one that I built, which I really like, which is how to build a birdhouse, which just features still images. It's all done with still images with conversation, still images of my brother-in-law who has Parkinson's disease. And when I went to visit my sister, who he's married to, she's like, I can't get him to do anything. I mean, like, he just kind of feels bad about himself and he just sits around. And so I told him, Michael, I want to make this video, but I need somebody who would be able to build a birdhouse. And he was like, well, I could build a birdhouse. Could you? All right. So he went to the hardware store. He got all the stuff. He came back and he built a birdhouse. And he was so proud of himself. And I was able to capture those pictures and turn them into a little video. And my son's girlfriend just made one about how to make focaccia. So we're having a ton of fun with it. And I will say that we're able to build these using AI. So they're very different from all of our other content. And we're able to build them because my son created a video factory for us. So
Wow.
his dad had dementia and he's interested in doing some stuff to help Zinnia. So he built a cloud-based video factory for us that allows us to rapidly build videos like these three that I have described. Well, the Today in History is done, but the other two, the lifelong learning and the quizzes, we can build them really quickly on any topic. And so we get requests. People will be like, my dad really would love to see something that is made for somebody who, like we just did one that is the life of a plumber.
When you're talking about these things, it's like we talk about purpose. That,
Yes.
what's your purpose and how does that change throughout aging? And when they see something, when the mechanic sees the oil change going on, it's not only about who they were, it's about that purpose, that identity that you're also triggering that still is in there. And then you see it like in your testimonials of people saying, oh my gosh, we didn't know that she would speak again, or I haven't heard them laugh in years, and it's like, it's tapping into that part of them. It's really about triggering that inner purpose again. And I just think that's
Love that.
amazing.
It is. It is. It's about their identity. I remember I was doing volunteer work at a community and there was this guy, I can't remember his name now, but he was in a like tilt back wheelchair. I tried so many times to speak with him and he just wouldn't talk to me and I assumed he was nonverbal. So one day I saw his daughter and I stopped her and I said, I would love to have a conversation with your dad, but I cannot find a way in. Tell me something about him. And she said, well, I mean, not many people know that he was once a professional ice skater. Okay. So the next time I saw him, I said, so I understand that you are a professional ice skater. And he lit up and he just started talking about ice skating. So,
Wow.
because
Yeah.
that is his identity.
Mhm.
And it's not, I understand that you were a professional ice skater. It's that you are, because he still is.
I
He
hear
is.
you. Yeah, I hear you use that language throughout this episode, and it's the present tense you're
Yes.
using. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, leave it up to him if he wants to say, I don't do that anymore. But I have found that when I speak to people and include who they were in who they are, that they are very responsive.
Wow. It really is amazing. And it's going to touch many lives. And as people try to figure out families that are getting that diagnosis thoroughly onset and what are we doing? What do we do? And I just hope people get education on both how to understand it and then how to do this, how to connect, how to engage. Coming out of your experience, people that are facing this for the first time, there's resources and tools that like you have created, you yourself,
Yeah.
that is available. And that's the thing here that's so worth sharing that I just want to make sure gets out there. So yeah, absolutely impressed. When somebody's going through that and there's just all this feeling of loss,
Yeah.
it's like, what do they say? The longest goodbye. There's a reason that's the term, that the phrase that's used, but how do we still be able to connect and engage? I have a lightning round. I call it Ready or Not, a little bit of play on words to my podcast name. Are you game to answer a couple questions?
Of course I am.
Okay, wonderful. So in the Ready or Not lightning round, it's no overthinking, just your first instinct, pretty easy questions. The first one is, on a home, do you prefer a front porch or a back deck?
Front porch.
Okay. And insider language, what's a phrase or a piece of industry jargon that outside of your field people wouldn't understand, and what does it mean?
Outside of my field, they wouldn't understand. I guess probably, I mean, the one that pops up quickly is anosognosia.
Yeah. And could you go into what that is again?
Sure, anosognosia is the idea that the parts of the brain that the brain doesn't recognize that the brain is not working.
Mm,
And so this is true. If you just looked up anosognosia, you'd see anosognosia and schizophrenia, anosognosia and any host of neurological disorders, but it's also something that's very real with dementia. And probably 50% or more of people go through at some time anosognosia where they don't really get that their brain is the problem. Like I actually believe that it is in fact your brain that's the problem because I am fine. So I think that that is a phrase that people
yeah.
don't get. And then maybe another one is just caregiver burden.
Yeah.
What is it like to be a caregiver? I think that people don't really get it. More people are starting to get it because more people know people who are caregivers. But to understand that people who are not caregivers, can in very simple ways support caregivers, even if it just means that you send somebody a text
Yeah.
every 3 or 4 days that just says, "I'm thinking about you and amazed by the work you do. Love ya, mwah."
Yeah.
Right?
Gives them fuel and yeah, that
Yeah.
moment. And the last question is, it's one thing at 55. If every listener did just one thing at the age of 55 to make life easier at 75, what would it be? What would be your advice for the listener at 55?
Yeah, fix your sleep.
Fix your sleep?
I mean,
Okay. That's really,
yeah, if you're not getting good sleep, it can have devastating effects later on. So, whatever that looks like for you, it actually is important to fix your sleep. I think that one of the greatest impediments to good sleep is alcohol. And for a lot of people, it's even just one drink. And so, what I tell people is that if instead of having a glass of wine every night, if you do cut to every other night, you've just cut your alcohol consumption in half, which is going to have a vast improvement on your quality of sleep. So,
okay.
yeah.
Okay, sleep. Interesting. Okay, well, again, these are just small questions. I always say all these things start as like simple decisions every day that we just choose to implement and to live in a different way. What we take in and actually act on that makes the difference, that's what accumulates. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate, I hope the listeners today just got a wealth of information and understanding of dementia and also tools and resources and ways to think about it that you can bring into your home.
Mhm.
And, like you say, not only encourage the engagement and the connection, but also maybe a little bit of respite for the caregiver too. So,
Oh my God, yeah.
Allyson, I just thank you so much for being here, for telling the audience about Zinnia TV. And tell us one more time how to find the website. And is there anything on YouTube?
We do have a YouTube channel, and so all of our education stuff is posted on YouTube. So if you just looked up Zinnia TV, and it's Zinnia like the flower, Zinnia TV, and it's called that because I am a big gardener. Zinnias are my favorite flower. One of the things I love about zinnias is the fact that they thrive even in pretty crappy conditions. So anyway,
That's beautiful.
thank you. So zinniatv.com, and there's a free 14-day trial if anybody wants to check it out. You do need to put in a credit card number, but if you cancel within 14 days, your credit card won't be charged. So I always recommend that people just kind of check it out first and see if it's something that might work for you.
Okay, so go to the website, go to the YouTube channel. And, well, again, thank you so much, Allyson. It has been a pleasure. And I hope, I know that the more people that know about Zinnia, the more people will have connection and hope in caring for their loved one with dementia. So thank you so much.
You're so welcome. It's been a real pleasure. I appreciate the work that you do.
Thank you. Thanks for joining me on Not Ready Yet, Curating Conversations for the Aging Journey. If something in this episode gave you clarity or the courage to start an important conversation, or offered a new way to look at things, I hope you'll share it with someone who might need the same encouragement. Remember, navigating aging isn't something we have to do alone or in crisis. With love, logic, and the right tools, we can face what's next with confidence and connection. Be sure to follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you're feeling generous, leave a review. It helps others find the show. And just a quick note, the information shared on this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute for medical, psychiatric, legal, or other professional advice. Always consult a qualified professional for guidance tailored to your unique situation. This is Lisa Harper, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.